really not like to hear that. I understand the conundrum of it all. Jeez, I wonder what that is. Don't recall doing that.
Brad Pitt, both a symbol of glory and a monument of tragedy. He is not only Hollywood's golden boy, but also a face etched deeply into the memory of generations. A beauty seemingly molded from the glow of studio lights, a career tied to iconic roles, and a love life that has always kept the media buzzing. All of these have made him an irreplaceable legend. But the brighter the spotlight, the darker the shadows behind the curtain of his private life. Broken marriages, a family once thought perfect turning into a battlefield of lawsuits, children drifting away, and years spent wrestling with alcohol, therapy, and loneliness. Brad Pitt once held everything a man could dream of, only to lose what mattered most. Today, in his 60s, Brad Pitt is not just an Oscar-winning actor or a powerful producer. He is also the embodiment of a paradox. The higher he climbed, the more visible the cracks that would never fully heal. And the lingering question remains. After all this, will he find peace? Or will he forever live in the emptiness fate has carved out for him? Brad Pitt was born on December 18, 1963, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, the eldest son in a devout Baptist family where duty, discipline, and the appearance of being perfect were valued above any emotion. His father, William, ran a trucking company with a rigid personality, believing in absolute order and teaching his son through principles that could never be bent. His mother, Jane, was gentle and loving, but even her tenderness was wrapped in layers of doctrine for a sensitive child. That very protection sometimes felt like shackles. From the age of 6, Brad already knew how to read the atmosphere in the room. Was his father's gaze tightening? Did his mother's voice go quiet? Was the silence at dinner stretching unnaturally long? He learned to say just enough to avoid conflict, to hide away the questions swirling in his mind. By the time he was 10, he had mastered the art of wearing a mask. To his schoolmates, he was the lively boy who excelled at golf, tennis, swimming, basketball, born to shine, it seemed. But at home, the air grew heavy. Silence swallowed every sound. The unspoken lesson repeated itself day after day. Swallow your doubts, bury your fears, and keep your smile wide enough so the world believes everything is fine. Years later, Brad admitted he grew up always hiding behind a smile, carrying what he described as too much guilt and shame. It was not a childhood filled with violence, but one suffocating nonetheless. Church became the place where he learned to sit still for hours, eyes fixed on the pastor, while his head swirled with questions he dared not voice. Curiosity was treated as rebellion, and at school he had to run faster, laugh louder, join more activities to prove he was normal, like everyone else. Yet when the bedroom door closed, Brad would lie silently staring at the ceiling, wondering, did anyone really see who he was? Or were they all just looking at the mask? That contradiction, radiant from afar, yet unsettled up close, became the cruel blueprint for his entire life. Brad Pitt would be admired by millions, grace magazine covers, and climb the Oscar stage. But deep inside, he remained the boy yearning for a gentleness he had never known. At 13, while many kids began to rebel, Brad learned instead to suppress himself. He later described those years as not violent, but so restrictive it was like living inside a map with no turns. Within that stifling box, another hunger was born. The craving to break free, to breathe without asking permission, to stand on a stage where he could finally expose the emotions he had long been forced to bury. That craving only grew stronger as time passed, until Brad decided to leave Missouri, crossing the boundaries of his small-town life to find another path. He stepped into acting classes, tried his hand at small roles, and with deep irony, pretending became the safest way to tell the truth. The later chapters of his life, with all their triumphs and losses, seem to have been inscribed back in his childhood home in America's Midwest, where gentle smiles concealed strict rules, and where a boy learned how to shine in public while quietly aching in the dark. Brad Pitt's beginnings seemed ordinary, yet they carried a silent tragedy. The wounds of childhood did not appear on the surface. The silence seemed harmless, until the brightest spotlight later exposed the price he had to pay. As a teenager, Brad found a crack through which he could breathe. The movie theaters in Springfield. In the thick darkness, when the auditorium fell silent and the silver screen lit up, the boy would stay through 2, sometimes 3 showings in a row until the staff eventually asked him to leave. For his peers, movies were just a weekend date or a way to kill time. For Brad, they were oxygen, the rare place where emotions were not suppressed but exploded into laughter, tears, and screams. Years later, he admitted, "I felt something bigger than myself." That obsession, fragile at first like a wisp of smoke, grew into a hunger nothing could contain. When he entered the University of Missouri in 1982, majoring in journalism and advertising, Brad tried to play the role of the dutiful son. But the 4 classroom walls, with lectures about media plans and market research, only made him feel stifled. They were like a new cage, more discreet, but just as confining. 4 years passed, and he was only 2 credits short of graduating. Just 2 more, and he would have the degree his family expected. But Brad knew that diploma would not bring freedom. So he walked away. "I had this sense there was something out there for me," Brad recalled. In 1986, when he packed all his clothes, a few cassette tapes, and a fragile dream into his old Datsun, Brad wasn't just leaving Missouri. He was fleeing an invisible prison, where invisibility was a life sentence. In that place, a forced smile risked becoming permanent, and the boy inside would never be able to breathe. The road westward was not just geography. It was the first escape of his life. That decision was a leap into the abyss without a safety net. He drove west, the beat-up Datsun stuffed with clothes, cassette tapes, and an invisible faith. Los Angeles appeared not as a promised land, but as his first trial. With only $325 in his pocket, Brad took any job he could, chauffeuring strippers to bachelor parties, hauling refrigerators, and sweating inside a giant chicken suit outside El Pollo Loco. Each shift sliced away at his pride, but it was the price of survival. The only thing he refused to compromise on was the money for acting classes. Brad poured it all into sessions with Roy London, the infamous Hollywood coach, known for teaching actors not to pretend, but to live truthfully in their roles. In that cramped room, Brad was, for the first time, encouraged to tremble, allowed to hesitate, to treat doubt as fuel rather than a flaw. There, the boy who once had to hide every emotion behind a smile learned a vital lesson. To be an artist, one must first dare to be honest with oneself. From 1987 to 1990, Brad Pitt was nothing more than a fleeting shadow on screen. He appeared in a few episodes of Dallas Growing Pains, 21 Jump Street, popular TV series of the era. Each time, he barely had a few minutes of screen time, sometimes just standing in the background as an unnamed handsome guy. The meager paychecks were just enough to cover rent for his cramped Los Angeles apartment. Enough to keep him afloat, but not enough to call it living. Yet what troubled Brad most wasn't money, but the fear of being boxed in. Each time he saw himself on television, he didn't feel joy, but unease. Handsome faces in Hollywood came and went like autumn leaves, one gust of wind, and they were forgotten. Brad feared the same fate, a passing name, a fleeting image, gone before he could leave any mark. Then in 1991, an unexpected opportunity arrived, and with it, the paradox began. In Thelma and Louise, Ridley Scott gave Brad only a small part, the drifter J.D. on screen for less than 15 minutes. A character who needed nothing more than a cowboy hat, a dazzling smile, and a steamy bedroom scene with Gina Davis. Yet that was enough to spark a frenzy. As soon as the film hit theaters, Brad Pitt's name was everywhere. His posters covered the bedroom walls of millions of American girls. Magazines hailed him as Hollywood's new golden boy, and studios lined up to offer him lead roles. Overnight, Brad went from a nobody to a sex symbol, the dream man everyone was talking about. But that sudden explosion left him unsettled. Brad Pitt felt uncomfortable in this new spotlight. He confessed, "I was bothered by that label. I wanted to be taken seriously." Behind the cowboy smile that shook the world, Brad began to feel the invisible trap tightening. Would he always remain just a face, or would he have the chance to prove himself as a true actor? That was the cruel paradox of his rising career. The very role that opened Hollywood's doors became a gilded cage. He had left Missouri to escape the suffocating silence of his Baptist household, endured standing on street corners in a chicken suit just to pay for acting lessons, and faced the humiliation of anonymity. Yet when opportunity finally arrived, the reward wasn't freedom, but a new kind of chain, the image of the perfect man, worshipped by the world, but suffocating to him. To the public eye, Brad sparkled as the embodiment of the American dream. Tousled blonde hair, blazing blue eyes, a smile that decorated millions of teenage bedroom walls. But when night fell and he was left alone, Brad felt it all fragile, incomplete. The unease from his youth rose again. Was he truly an artist or just a beautiful face, a decoration Hollywood used to sell tickets? That opportunity came with A River Runs Through It, 1992. At first, Brad failed the audition, but he refused to accept defeat. He sent in another tape, choosing a different scene to perform. That decision changed his fate. Robert Redford saw in Brad a complexity and subtlety that went beyond his handsome face, and gave him the role of Paul McLean, the wild, charming, yet self-destructive son. On screen, Brad was no longer just the pretty face. He brought to life a character both free-spirited and fragile, mirroring the very contradictions within himself. The film succeeded, and for the first time, Hollywood looked at Pitt through different eyes. He didn't stop there. Brad continued to challenge himself even in small roles. In True Romance, 1993, he appeared for only a few minutes as Floyd, the stoner slouched on the sofa. That character was Brad's own suggestion to director Tony Scott as a way to break free from the perfect hero image. The improvisation turned Floyd into a standout, proving Brad could make even a cameo unforgettable. 1994 marked a true turning point. In Interview with the Vampire, Brad faced a backstage hell, wearing thick contact lenses, heavy wigs, shooting endless nights in the cold, even hanging upside down for hours so the veins in his face would bulge. He felt the role of Lewis was constraining, and last-minute script changes only deepened his frustration. At one point, Brad wanted to quit, but a $40 million contract forced him to stay. The film stirred controversy, too, especially the scene where Louis kisses the child Claudia, played by 11-year-old Kirsten Dunst. Kirsten later recalled it as her first on-screen kiss, and extremely unpleasant. Even Anne Rice, the author of the original novel, had initially opposed Brad and Tom Cruise being cast, but after the film's release, she praised them highly. For Brad, it was a grueling experience, but also a lesson. If he wanted recognition, he had to endure even unwanted roles, suffering in order to grow. That same year, Brad played Tristan Ludlow in Legends of the Fall. This role defined him as the tragic romantic star. Tristan embodied freedom, wildness, love, and devastating loss. The character not only captivated audiences, but also earned Brad his first Golden Globe nomination. More importantly, it proved he could carry a major film, balancing both charisma and psychological depth. In just 3 short years, Brad Pitt had gone from the handsome face in the background through humiliating failures to establishing himself in both drama and tragedy. If Thelma and Louise opened the door, then A River Runs Through It and Legends of the Fall truly laid the foundation for his image as a serious actor. But behind the glow that had begun to shine, the question still lingered. Would Brad Pitt be remembered as an artist or merely as a visual icon Hollywood knew how to exploit? That very question pushed Brad into the harshest stage of his career, seeking roles that could prove his talent, even if they were dark, twisted, and shattered the glamorous image the public had imposed on him. In 1995, Brad accepted the role in David Fincher's Seven. Playing young detective David Mills, who faces the serial killer John Doe, Kevin Spacey, was not only a test of acting, but also a turning point for his image. Mills was no longer the dream boy, but a reckless cop, impulsive, hot-tempered, careless, and ultimately crushed by evil. The set of C7N was grueling. During a chase scene, Brad was injured for real, breaking his arm, which forced Fincher to rewrite the script so the character would wear a cast. The film's ending, with Brad screaming in agony in front of the mysterious box, became one of the most chilling moments of the 1990s cinema. The movie was a huge success, but more importantly, it was the first time audiences saw Brad Pitt unafraid to look ugly in order to portray human tragedy. Right after that, he took on an even bigger challenge with Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys, 1995. Brad played Jeffrey Goins, a disturbed lunatic speaking in erratic bursts, with wild eyes hiding a terrifying truth. It was a bold choice, a handsome leading man willingly dismantling his image with a deranged, eccentric role. Gilliam recalled that Brad spent hours studying stuttering speech patterns, erratic movements, even practicing in psychiatric hospitals to prepare. The result? Brad Pitt was nominated for an Oscar and won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor. Critics began to see him differently, not as a pretty box office star, but as a serious actor willing to take risks to expand his artistic range. After 2 intense roles in a row, Brad attempted a return to romantic territory with Meet Joe Black, 1998. He played death itself in the body of a young man named Joe Black, coming to Earth to experience love. The film was long, slow, and received mixed reviews, but it showed Brad's continued hunger for experimentation. A character who was mysterious, fragile, and alien to humanity. Some dismissed his performance as cold, But others argued that this distance was exactly what made Joe Black feel like an outsider. It was proof that Brad refused to play safe, instead seeking out roles that were different, even if not always flawless. The pinnacle of this period came with Fight Club, 1999. As Tyler Durden, the leader of an underground organization, both seductive and dangerous, Brad Pitt created a character that became iconic for an entire generation. The Fight Club set was notoriously harsh. Brad and Edward Norton trained in boxing, karate, and even had their teeth chipped to make their characters more real. Brad admitted he smoked heavily, trained relentlessly, and intentionally wore down his body to embody Tyler's nihilistic defiance. Upon release, Fight Club flopped at the box office and was criticized as violent and meaningless. But only a few years later, it became a cult classic, Tyler Durden, a cultural symbol of rebellion, and Brad Pitt firmly etched his name into cinema history as an actor unafraid to take on difficult, abrasive, and contradictory roles. During this period, Brad Pitt walked a relentless path. From the tormented Mills in C7N, to the manic Gawns in 12 Monkeys, to the coldly enigmatic Death in Meet Joe Black, and finally the anarchic Tyler Durden in Fight Club. These were not just consecutive roles, but a deliberate process of breaking apart the golden boy image to prove himself a true artist. No longer trapped in the gilded cage Hollywood had placed him in back, in 1991, he began to redraw his own portrait, that of an actor unafraid to dive into chaos and darkness in search of human truth. Stepping into the new decade, Brad Pitt had all the glory of a global star, yet he still hadn't found peace in the old question: was he truly an artist or just an icon? Ocean's 11 in 2001 marked his return to commercial cinema. As Rusty Ryan, Pitt appeared sharp, witty, and constantly chewing on something, a small detail, but one that etched the character into viewers' memories. The film was a resounding success, creating the power trio of Clooney, Damon, Pitt, and bringing him worldwide admiration. Yet even as audiences applauded, Brad was haunted by doubt. Had he really proven his artistry, or was he just a bankable star? That uncertainty grew sharper when he played Achilles in Troy, 2004. The role of the perfect warrior forced Pitt to endure months of grueling training, strict diets, and combat practice to carve a sculpted physique. On screen, Achilles became an emblem of masculinity, leaving millions in awe. But once the applause faded, Brad felt only emptiness. He later admitted disappointment that the role had turned into little more than a display of muscles, while his true desire was to dig into the character's psychology. That experience made him more determined to choose carefully, steering away from roles based solely on appearance. A year later, Mr. and Mrs. Smith threw Brad into the eye of the storm. The action-romantic comedy was a global hit, but what people remembered most was his explosive chemistry with Angelina Jolie. The on-screen spark spilled over into real life, and the world soon dubbed them Brangelina. While audiences celebrated the new couple, his marriage to Jennifer Aniston collapsed, turning Brad into tabloid fodder. Commercial success had never been so entangled with personal turmoil, and once again Pitt found himself consumed by his public image. Amid the chaos of his private life, Brad turned to art house cinema to hold on to something true. Babel, 2006, brought forth a Brad Pitt who was older, weary, and helpless as his wife lay wounded in Morocco. No longer the glamorous star, he allowed his face to appear gaunt, his voice to crack, revealing a man deeply vulnerable. The film earned an Oscar nomination, and Pitt received rare praise. At last, he had truly disappeared into his character. That choice continued with the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007. In stark contrast to blockbusters, the film unfolded slowly, like a mournful poem about betrayal and death. Brad embodied Jesse James with haunted eyes, uneasy gestures, a figure both legendary and lonely. The movie flopped at the box office, but it won him the Best Actor award at the Venice Film Festival, a precious artistic reward proving Brad was willing to sacrifice revenue for lasting value. In 2008, he took on his greatest challenge with The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Playing Benjamin, a man born old and growing younger with time, required Pitt to convey every shade of life, innocence, love, loss, and the helplessness of time running backward. Modern visual effects helped, but it was Pitt's eyes, voice, and subtlety that gave the character life. The film earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor, the artistic peak he had been chasing for 2 decades. Soon after, Pitt surprised audiences again with Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds, 2009. With an exaggerated Tennessee drawl and a rugged swagger, he became Aldo Raine, the commander of a Jewish-American commando unit hunting Nazis. The character was both brutal and comical, and the line, "I want my scalps," quickly became iconic. The film was a massive success, winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes, proving Pitt could thrive across genres, from poignant drama to dark comedy. By the end of the 2000s, Brad Pitt had reached a rare double peak, both a box office superstar and a festival-honored artist with Oscar nominations. Yet the inner conflict never faded. On one side stood commercial fame and the noisy whirlwind of his life with Angelina Jolie. On the other, the hunger to be recognized for artistic depth. That very duality shaped Brad Pitt in the following decade, a man suspended between glory and shadows, still searching for an identity he had yet to fully claim. As Brad Pitt began stepping out of the shadows of supporting roles to become a face Hollywood paid attention to, his love life also started drawing the spotlight. The glow of cinema opened doors, but his relationships revealed a different Brad. Young, experimental, and never quite steady enough to hold on for long. In 1986, still an unknown actor in Los Angeles, Brad dated British pop singer Sunita. The romance was fleeting, but carried the feel of a fresh breeze. The boy from Missouri suddenly found himself in the world of disco lights and pop glamour. Soon after, he grew close to actress Jill Schoelen, whom he met while filming Cutting Class, 1989. This was the relationship Brad trusted enough to get engaged, only for Jill to abruptly end it a few months later, leaving him to follow another director. The heartbreak left Brad with his first real taste of bitterness, a reminder that love in Hollywood could be as fragile as a movie contract. In the following years, Brad continued to move through a series of romantic trials. He dated E.G. Daily, who later recalled that Brad always had a soul much deeper than his good looks suggested. Then came a controversial relationship with Robin Givens, who was in the process of separating from boxer Mike Tyson. The media turned Brad into a name wrapped in curiosity, while he himself learned the weight of scrutiny that came with public romance. In 1989, during the MTV Awards, another girlfriend, Christina Applegate, famously left him mid-date to go off with someone else, a humiliating moment that showed Brad how ruthless both love and fame could be. Yet all of these were only small chapters before he entered the most intense and defining romance of his youth, Juliette Lewis. They met on the set of Too Young to Die, 1990. Brad was 27, Juliette only 17. The age gap drew controversy, but the two defied judgment and stayed together for nearly 4 years, even starring again in California, 1993. Brad would later confess that his love with Juliette was crazy and the truest thing he had known at the time. Their breakup was quiet, but the mark it left was lasting, so much so that in a 1995 interview, Brad admitted Juliette will always be an important part of my heart. During those years, Brad Pitt was climbing steadily up Hollywood's ladder while stumbling just as often in love. Each relationship left its trace, the sweetness of youth, the sting of betrayal, the wild intensity of passion. They were not merely tabloid stories, but part of the hidden foundation that explained why, later in life, Brad would keep searching in love for something more enduring than fame. As Brad Pitt was breaking out of the pretty boy shell thanks to Legends of the Fall, 1994, fate brought him to Gwyneth Paltrow on the set of C7N, 1994. At the time, Pitt was 31, Paltrow 22, a rising star, the daughter of director Bruce Paltrow and actress Blythe Danner. Amid the grim atmosphere of the crime thriller, they found freshness in each other. He was mature, calm, she was quick-witted, spirited, and born into the world of art. In no time, they became Hollywood's golden couple. The press hailed Gwyneth as America's sweetheart, Brad as the sexiest man alive, and together they seemed like a dream pairing. They appeared on red carpets hand in hand, vacationed together, and never shied away from public displays of affection. In 1996, Brad officially proposed. Before flashing cameras, Gwyneth proudly showed off a sparkling diamond ring, while Brad smiled with quiet joy. To fans, their upcoming wedding was set to be one of Hollywood's dream ceremonies. But behind the radiant facade, Gwyneth was still too young to embrace the weight of marriage. She later admitted, "I was only in my early 20s. I didn't fully know who I was, let alone ready to be someone's wife." Cracks began to appear. Gwyneth, raised in a film family and accustomed to constant expectation, felt suffocated by being compared to a megastar like Pitt. Brad, on the other hand, who longed for stability after a strict childhood, was disheartened as marriage remained only a dangling promise. In early 1997, they abruptly announced their breakup, despite the wedding being near. The shock stunned Hollywood, while Brad, usually private, fell into a long silence. Years later, Gwyneth admitted much of the fault was hers. "I messed it up. I was too young. I didn't know what I wanted. Brad was amazing, but I wasn't mature enough to hold on to him." What haunted the public was that they parted while still very much in love. At the time, Brad had considered Gwyneth the love of his life, and the collapse left a deep scar on him. It transformed him from a romantic who once believed naively in marriage into a man far more cautious and guarded before entering his next relationship. After the shock of his breakup with Gwyneth Paltrow, Brad Pitt withdrew for a while, but Hollywood did not allow him much silence. Brad first met Jennifer Aniston in 1998 on a blind date arranged by their agents. He was still reeling from heartbreak, while Jen was at the height of Friends. What drew them together wasn't fame, but the rare sense of peace Brad found with a woman. She made him laugh, pulled him out of his constant gloom. He gave her the protection she had always longed for. Just over a year later, they went public. Their July 2000 wedding in Malibu was described as a Hollywood dream. 200 guests, fireworks lighting up the night sky, live performances, all wrapped in the image of a perfect couple. To the public, Brad and Jen were the embodiment of American happiness. He, the global movie star. She, the queen of television. But that happiness, like fireworks, was dazzling yet fragile. Behind the hand-holding on red carpets, gaps began to appear. Brad yearned to have children soon, to build a family of his own to heal the strict and emotionally barren childhood he came from. Jen, on the other hand, was at the peak of her career with friends and film projects. She wasn't ready to trade dream roles for motherhood too early. That difference, at first only light arguments, eventually grew into a rift that could not be bridged. Media pressure turned every whisper into an explosion. American tabloids painted Jennifer as selfish, choosing career over family. Meanwhile, Brad was surrounded by rumors that he was lonely in his marriage. Jen once admitted in an interview, "People thought we had everything, but the truth is, I cried a lot behind closed doors." The breaking point came in 2004, when Brad starred in Mr. and Mrs. Smith alongside Angelina Jolie. At first, it was just an action comedy project, but soon the chemistry between the two stars sparked something impossible to hide. Cameras captured them fighting, arguing, kissing on screen. But what truly shook the public were the behind-the-scenes photos. Brad laughing easily with Angelina, their eyes meeting in ways that seemed anything but acting. Rumors of an affair spread like wildfire. Brad denied it. Angelina remained vague, insisting she never broke up a family. Jen, in a desperate attempt to save the marriage, chose endurance. She still appeared with her husband, still held his hand on the red carpet. But her smile was stiff, her eyes heavy. The press dubbed her America's most beautiful betrayed wife, a label both sympathetic and cruel. In their lavish Beverly Hills mansion, family dinners grew heavier by the day. Brad fell silent, his gaze drifting elsewhere. Jen tried to make conversation, but the distance between them felt like an invisible wall. Friends of Jen later revealed that many nights she sat alone in the living room, hugging a pillow and crying, while Brad was away for weeks on set. Brad was torn. On one side, responsibility to the wife who had shared years of calm with him. On the other, the irresistible pull of Angelina, the wild, unpredictable opposite of Jen's gentle stability. He felt split between two worlds. Jen was more tormented than ever. She longed to be a mother but was haunted by the thought that Brad wanted children, not with her but with the other woman. In January 2005, their separation was announced. The statement was carefully worded. "We remain committed to our friendship and have great love and admiration for one another." But behind Hollywood's curtains, it was a collapse. Jen fell into a near-depressive state. In a later interview, she broke down in tears and confessed, "I really did love Brad. I thought he was my final destination." As for Brad, though he quickly moved on with Angelina, he still carried a scar. The image of his former wife's sad eyes, her shattered trust, became something he could never fully erase. Hollywood's golden couple was no more, leaving behind a bitter lesson. Even the most beautiful love, under the harsh lights and temptations of a glittering world, can turn to ashes. After the golden marriage with Jennifer Aniston ended, Brad Pitt barely had time to recover before the world saw him hand in hand with Angelina Jolie. And from there, a new chapter began. more glamorous, more passionate, but also sowing the seeds of the painful collapse to come. They met in 2004 on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The scenes of married spies were supposed to stay in the script, but the glances, the smiles, and the physical sparks went beyond the screen. When Brad officially divorced Aniston in early 2005, the public was almost certain Angelina was the reason. Together, they became the most scrutinized couple in the world, but also Brangelina, Hollywood's new symbol. Brad and Angelina didn't hide their love, they turned it into a statement through humanitarian trips. In 2005, after going public, they were seen in Ethiopia and Cambodia, places long tied to Angelina. These weren't just photo ops with poor children, but the building blocks of an image, a global family. Maddox, the boy Angelina had adopted from Cambodia in 2002, quickly began to see Brad as a father. When the two held his hand, strolling through Paris, the press declared them Hollywood's new family. Then came Zahara, adopted from Ethiopia in 2005. Images of Brad cradling her tenderly, as though she were his own, filled magazine covers, transforming him from a Playboy heartthrob into a Father of the Year figure. In 2006, the whole world held its breath for news of their first biological child. Angelina chose to give birth in Namibia, away from the paparazzi, and Shiloh Jolie Pitt entered the world under strict security. Her first photos, sold exclusively to People and Hello, for a record $10 million, later donated to charity, instantly became the most expensive baby pictures ever. In 2007, they came to Vietnam and adopted a boy named Pham Quang Sang, later renamed Pax Thien. Images of Brad, awkward before the Vietnamese press but tenderly holding his new son's hand, convinced the world that Brangelina was truly a family that crossed borders and skin colors. In 2008, in Nice, France, Angelina gave birth to twins, Knox and Vivian. Once again, the world watched closely, and the first photos of the twins sold to People and Hello for $14 million, a record sum in publishing history. 6 children, 3 adopted and 3 biological, filled the arms of Brangelina, leading the press to describe their family as a mini United Nations. The picture was so perfect that many believed they had created the ideal family model for the 21st century. Beautiful, humanitarian, and powerful. Yet behind those perfect photographs lay cracks that couldn't be hidden. Angelina, absorbed in her role as a UN ambassador, was often away in war zones and refugee camps. Brad, meanwhile, shouldered the responsibilities of fathering 6 children while fighting to maintain his superstar status in Hollywood. The double pressure strained their Beverly Hills mansion life. They argued over whether to raise their children strictly or freely, over finances, and even over whether Angelina was too consumed by her humanitarian work to notice the family at home. To the world, they were the perfect couple. Inside, the family was already fracturing, cracks that would soon rip apart Brad Pitt's dream paradise. In 2014, after nearly a decade living as husband and wife, Brad and Angelina formalized their love with a small wedding at their Miraval estate in France. There was no Hollywood extravagance, only close family and their 6 children, who were the true center of the day. Maddox and Pax walked their mother down the aisle. Zahara and Vivian scattered petals, while Shiloh and Knox carried the rings. Angelina wore a simple white gown embroidered with her children's scribbles, a detail that the press called a family wedding, not a star wedding. For many, that moment proved Brangelina had achieved rare completeness in volatile Hollywood. But that completeness lasted only 2 years. In September 2016, Angelina Jolie shocked the world by filing for divorce, demanding full custody of the children. The globe was stunned. The couple once hailed as the ultimate model of love and power was suddenly in ruins. Quickly, details emerged. A private flight from France to the U.S., during which Brad was accused of yelling and even clashing with eldest son, Maddox. The FBI and Los Angeles Child Services investigated. Though Brad was eventually cleared and not charged, the perfect father image he had built collapsed overnight. Angelina accused him of alcoholism and anger issues. Brad didn't fight much publicly. Instead, he quietly entered therapy, attending Alcoholics Anonymous sessions. In a later interview, he admitted, "I lost my family." A simple confession, yet one that felt like an indictment of the reckless years that had driven his marriage and fatherhood to the edge. The divorce soon became a near-decade-long legal war. At the center, custody of the children and their vast fortune, especially the Miraval estate, once their happiest place, now a bitter battleground. Endless hearings, lawsuits, countersuits, and constant rumors kept Brad Pitt's name tied more to divorce and legal battles than to cinema. More painful than the courtrooms was the distance from his children. Maddox went to study in South Korea and cut off contact with his father. Pax Thien also kept his distance. Shiloh, the biological daughter once seen as a symbol of reconciliation, recently dropped the Pitt surname, keeping only Jolie, a definitive sign of an irreparable rift. Brad still has ties with the younger children, but the family once called a mini-United Nations is now only broken fragments. With Jennifer Aniston, Brad Pitt lost a peaceful paradise. With Angelina Jolie, he lived out another paradise, but one that led straight to hell. That love had given him the dream of a large, beautiful family, but it also left him with the deepest wounds of his life. After the storm of divorce, Brad Pitt entered a period of rebuilding his life. The media constantly linked his name to new women, but most were fleeting, brief sparks in the dark. In 2018, rumors swirled about a romance between Brad and MIT professor-architect Neri Oxman after he was spotted several times at her office. Neri quickly denied the speculation, insisting they were only friends, though she spoke highly of Brad's intellect and character. The story ended as quickly as it began, leaving behind little more than a passing breeze. By 2020, Brad was unexpectedly seen with German model Nicole Poturalski. The two appeared together in France and even visited the Miraval estate, once his home with Angelina. But the relationship was nothing more than a short-lived fling, quietly ending as the pandemic brought everything to a halt. 2 years later, in October 2022, the name Emily Ratajkowski surfaced. Paparazzi captured them together, and headlines blazed with "Brad dating a supermodel." In reality, it was just a few casual meetings, leading nowhere. Then, in November 2022, Brad's life took a surprising turn when he met Inez de Ramon, a jewelry executive nearly 3 decades his junior. They were first seen at a Bono concert with friends, followed by Inez attending Brad's 59th birthday party that December. From then on, the relationship was no longer rumor. By February 2024, Inez had officially moved in with Brad in Los Angeles. The pinnacle came in September 2024, when they walked hand in hand on the red carpet at the Venice Film Festival. the first time since Angelina that Brad publicly appeared beside a partner, echoing the way he once did during the Brangelina years. After years of being engulfed in scandal and legal battles, Inez's presence marked a new chapter. Quiet, unshowy, yet enough to prove that Brad Pitt still believes in love, even after enduring the unhealable fractures of the past. Alongside his new love, Brad Pitt remains one of the wealthiest and most powerful actors in Hollywood. His fortune is estimated at around $400 million, largely from multi-million-dollar paychecks for leading roles and from his production company Plan B, which has backed several Oscar-winning films. As he entered his 60s, Brad Pitt was no longer the pretty boy who once drove Hollywood wild, but he was still among its richest and most influential stars. His net worth, estimated at $400 million, reflects not only massive salaries. He has earned $20 to $30 million for blockbuster leads, but also the success of Plan B Entertainment, the company he co-founded. Plan B produced films that went on to claim Oscars, including 12 Years a Slave, Moonlight, and The Big Short, transforming Brad from a screen idol into a quiet mogul of the industry. But his wealth is not confined to paper. Brad indulges in passions that reveal both his zeal and his nostalgia. His garage houses a collection of four-wheeled beasts, an electric Porsche Taycan, a Tesla for comfort, and a Cadillac Escalade for security-laden commutes. On Los Angeles streets, he has often been spotted on a Harley Davidson, wind in his hair like the cowboy J.D. he once played. The skies, too, bear his mark. He pilots a Cirrus SR-22 for short trips and was even rumored to have bought a World War II Spitfire, indulging his fascination with history and speed. On his wrist, his choices shift with his moods. A vintage Rolex Submariner one day, a luxurious Patek Philippe Nautilus the next, or a refined Cartier tank. For Brad, watches are more than timekeepers. They are vessels of memory holding fragments of different stages in his life. If his movable assets reflect personal taste, his real estate portfolio tells the story of his life. During his years with Jennifer Aniston, Brad lived in a lavish Beverly Hills mansion, a paradise that eventually collapsed. Later, he owned a vast compound in Los Feliz, a cluster of homes where he and Angelina raised their children during the height of Brangelina. But in 2023, Brad sold the Los Feliz estate for nearly $39 million, as if severing ties with memories too heavy to carry. Today, he shares a $12 million Los Angeles mansion with Inez de Ramon, a simpler home that offers the peace he had long been missing. His crown jewel is the D.L. James House in Carmel, worth over $40 million, a Mediterranean-style villa perched above the Pacific, which he bought in 2022 as a retreat from the spotlight. In contrast, the Chateau Miraval estate in France, once the eternal dream where Brad and Angelina married, has become a bitter battlefield in ongoing legal disputes. Once a symbol of love, Miraval now stands as a reminder that no paradise lasts forever. Professionally, Brad has proven he has never stepped back. In 2024, he reunited with George Clooney in Wolves, a film that rekindled memories of the golden duo audiences adored in Ocean's 11. Their return wasn't just nostalgic. It was a statement that Brad still commanded Hollywood's center stage. Greater still was his 2025 triumph with F1, a film plunging audiences straight into the world of Formula One racing. Shot at real Grand Prix circuits, F1 became a global sensation, grossing over $600 million. In his 60s, Brad Pitt can still turn each return into a cinematic event, balancing art and commerce, cultural icon, and box office force. Brad Pitt is not just an actor, he is a businessman, a collector, a connoisseur, and above all, proof that even when one's private life falls apart, career and fortune can continue to write dazzling chapters. The only lingering question is, can all this luxury ever truly fill the emptiness within him? In 2025, Brad Pitt entered his 61st year with a chapter more dazzling than anyone expected. After years of being mired in disputes and private silences, he returned to the big screen with an explosion called F1. Directed by Joseph Kosinski, Brad played Sonny Hayes, a veteran driver making a comeback to save his team from collapse. The role was not just a cinematic revival, but also a reflection of his own life. A man who had once fallen, now rising again, tougher, grittier. F1 grossed over $600 million worldwide, restoring Brad's status as an A-list star with both artistic and commercial magnetism. His image on the red carpet that summer set the press ablaze. A sharp buzz cut, streaks of silver in his beard, an air of quiet confidence. He was no longer the young man from Legends of the Fall, but a seasoned gentleman who had weathered every storm. Brad called the experience the most extraordinary of his career, as it allowed him to fully live within the world of racing, on the track and beyond. Alongside that triumph, Brad prepared to reunite with audiences in The Adventures of Cliff Booth, a Netflix project in which he once again embodies the character that won him an Oscar in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Written by Quentin Tarantino and directed by David Fincher, the film began shooting in the summer of 2025, promising to extend the legacy of Cliff Booth, the stoic, enigmatic, haunting anti-hero. Not stopping there, Brad also signed on for Heart of the Beast, an action film directed by David Ayer and shot in New Zealand, bringing him back to the high-stakes adventure genre that once defined his career. Beyond cinema, Brad's presence continued to dominate through major ad campaigns, including a coffee commercial directed by Taika Waititi, with subtle nods to his current partner, Inez de Ramon. Amid the spotlight, he carried himself with a distinct style, calm, elegant, and more contemplative than before. Yet 2025 was not entirely serene. Reports surfaced that his longtime Los Feliz estate was broken into while Brad was busy promoting F1. The incident served as a reminder that, whether at the peak of fame or retreating from the stage, Brad Pitt's life has never been free from surprises. Looking back on the entire journey, the legacy Brad Pitt leaves behind goes far beyond the notion of Hollywood's pretty boy. He has become a multifaceted icon, a box office draw, an artist unafraid to push his own limits, and a producer behind films that have reshaped the flow of cinema itself. Plan B Entertainment, the company Brad co-founded, brought to audiences masterpieces like 12 Years a Slave, Moonlight, and The Big Short, proving that he not only chose roles wisely for himself, but also recognized the power of stories that needed to be told. Brad's influence runs deeper on a cultural level. Tyler Durden in Fight Club became a symbol of rebellion for an entire generation, while Benjamin Button opened a new way of reflecting on time and aging. Cliff Booth in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood embodied the quiet hero he had pursued all his life, laconic, steadfast, yet indispensable in the greater harmony. At each stage, Brad created characters that struck collective nerves, transcending the boundaries of mere performance. What makes his legacy unique is the paradox he carries within himself. a star who had everything, yet never stopped searching for meaning. His honesty in admitting moments of collapse, from alcohol to failed marriages, made him not a symbol of perfection, but a testament to resilience, something audiences saw and connected with. Today, Brad Pitt no longer needs to prove who he is. He lives in public memory as a long chapter of modern Hollywood, a face that never grows old, an artistic spirit willing to change, and a man whose fractures have been mended, at least in part, by the art he leaves behind. Perhaps the most haunting part of Brad Pitt's story is not in the films, nor in the stormy romances, but in the unanswered question: has he ever truly found peace for himself? Because sometimes the brightest spotlight is only a thin shell covering a soul longing for something simple. And you, when you look at Brad Pitt's journey from glory to heartbreak to rebirth, where do you think he will find happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for the next stories to come.